To me, the concept of Bankai has always been such a fun and rewarding experience to discuss. It gives us a really wonderful opportunity to revel in the creativity of some of Bleach's more out there and memorable abilities. But of course, that's a huge part of what makes Bankai so special to us as readers. Each and every time one of these is used throughout the Bleach manga, it becomes a real memorable event for us. It becomes a true milestone moment in the series that is forever ingrained in our memories. And so this video is designed to be a relatively straightforward celebration of that idea and concept of the ability of Bankai. We're going to be recapping each and every time throughout the Bleach manga someone activates their Bankai for the first time, that famous Bankai reveal. But we're going to be doing it with a slight twist. We're going to be looking at it arc by arc, counting each and every one of the new Bankai reveals to see which arc comes out best overall for Bankai representation. Before we begin, however, guys, if you haven't hit subscribe yet, make sure to do that now, as you are in the perfect place for Bleach content like this every single week. And also, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up as well, because supporting it like that really helps the video. It helps get it more exposure on YouTube and helps it reach more Bleach fans just like yourselves. And if you want to support this channel a little further, we do have a Patreon as well now, where you can get videos like this one early, and you can support me there for as little as $1 a month. And all the names up on screen right now are people doing just that, and I really want to say an enormous thank you. So before we really kick this video off, I want to do a little bit of housekeeping. I've come up with a way of kind of categorizing the Bankai reveals, because not all Bankai reveals were created equal. So essentially, I've got two different distinctions. A full Bankai reveal, this is when the Bankai is activated for the very first time, and we essentially see not necessarily everything it can do, because Kubo liked to build on Bankai with additional abilities, etc., but we get a really solid idea of what it can do. Ideally, it is being used properly in a fight scene scenario, and maybe we get one or two abilities, but regardless, it gets good use out of it, and we come away with a pretty good understanding. Then on the counterbalance of that, we have a half Bankai reveal, which is where a Bankai is revealed and we as readers are left with very little knowledge as to how it actually works, what it actually does. Either Kubo decided to take that fight off screen, or the Bankai user was immediately taken out. But either way, we will get down to the details of that on each reveal. So let's begin with the Soul Society arc, which is the first time we ever see a Bankai. And of course, most of you probably already know this, but the first person to use Bankai in the series is Mayuri Kurotsuchi in chapter 125 against Uryu Ishida in an amazing fight. This, of course, is the climax to that fight now, where Mayuri activates his Bankai Konjiki Ashisogi Jizo and summons the monstrosity to face Uryu, who is currently in his Let's Steal form. Now, in my opinion, this goes in the full Bankai reveal category. It was already a slightly contentious one off the bat, because Mayuri does get obliterated almost the moment he summons it. However, there is a bit of explanation about this Bankai. Mayuri gives us a little bit of exposition to work with, and I think we know enough about it to consider it a full Bankai reveal, considering we don't really see too many changes later on down the line. We know its principal abilities. It can summon massive swords out of its chest, but also, more importantly, it spews very, very dangerous poison across a massive radius, and that really is the crux of Mayuri's Bankai, particularly here and then even into the Waco Mundo arc as well. So I'm perfectly content with saying the first ever Bankai reveal was a full reveal. Up next in chapter 141, we have the reveal of Renji's Hihio Zabimaru. Now, of course, this isn't Renji's quote-unquote true Bankai, but that is not something we knew until virtually the end of the series. Hihio Zabimaru was Renji's Bankai for the majority of the story, so I'm more than happy to count this as a Bankai reveal. And I'm also counting it as another full Bankai reveal, as Renji actively uses this against Byakuya for a considerable amount of time. Like I said, we don't see all of its abilities here. For example, Hikotsu Tai-Ho is not used until the Arrancar arc, but we do get a really good idea of how Renji is planning on using this weapon for the remainder of the story. Speaking of Byakuya, however, the big bad of the Soul Society arc activates his Bankai a single chapter later in chapter 142, Senbon Zakura Kageyoshi. However, in my mind, this definitely feels more like a half Bankai reveal, as contentious as that may be. Certainly we see essentially the entire activation ritual. Byakuya drops his blade into the ground, enormous swords rise up, turn into petals, and Renji is eviscerated. However, this feels like a narrative tease to me done on purpose. This is a real sort of threat of Byakuya's power. It's not a real showcase of what he can do. Not even that much later on, his Bankai will be revealed in full against Ichigo, and you see the entire gamut. You see multiple abilities, you learn how he controls it with his hand. You don't get any of that here. Renji essentially just collapses to the floor. So for now, I'm happy to put this as a half reveal. In the meantime, however, in chapter 146, we have Kaname Tosen activating his Bankai, Suzumushi Tsukishiki Enma Koragi. And this is a really awesome Bankai. It's a shame it's the only time we see it in the series, where it creates this jet black dome that envelops Kaname and Kenpachi within and completely cancels out essentially all of Kenpachi's senses. It's a really awesome Bankai. This is obviously a full reveal. We get to see everything that it can do here. And unfortunately, it is taken apart by Kenpachi nearly quite literally, but for the short amount of time it was around, it was really cool. And then just a couple of chapters later, on chapter 148, Seijin Komamura would reveal his Bankai Kokujo Tengen Mio. However, I think that, again, this is just a half reveal. It is just a tease of what's to come. Now, admittedly, back in the day when this Bankai was first revealed, I don't think any of us really anticipated that it wouldn't have any more abilities, but if we're going on the time this was revealed, narratively, this is only a half reveal because it doesn't actually do anything. You really don't have a clue as to what this Bankai can do just yet. It just looks really cool. And so we reach the pinnacle of battles in the Soul Society arc, chapter 161. Once again, the big bad Byakuya Kuchiki activates his Bankai Senbon Zakura Kageyoshi, this time properly, however, and he would use this Bankai now throughout the remainder of his fight against Ichigo, using iconic abilities like Senkei, Shukei, Haku Teken, and just showing us exactly how he uses this immense power. And speaking of Ichigo, as if to mirror the Renji and Byakuya fight, not one chapter later in chapter 162, the full colour chapter, Ichigo reveals for the very first time his first version of Tensa Zangetsu, in what is truly just an absolute iconic moment in Bleach that everybody knows, everybody recognises, and still gives you chills today. However, we're not quite done yet with the Soul Society arc. There is one more Bankai to be seen. After Aizen reveals himself as a traitor in the arc's endgame and Hinamori is nearly killed, Toshiro Hitsugaya arrives on the scene, and in chapter 170 activates his Bankai Daiguren Hyorin Maru in a desperate attempt to kill Aizen. However, this is another half reveal in my opinion. He literally says the Bankai's name, you get to see it, it does look pretty amazing, but he is instantly wiped out by Aizen before he gets a chance to do anything with it. So it's a bit of a shame that the final Bankai of the arc is taken out so easily, but Hitsugaya will have plenty of chance to shine moving forwards. And so that's it for the Soul Society arc. Obviously the first big arc in the series has a real advantage in that every single Bankai essentially is going to be a brand new one, apart from Byakuya, who has the honour of using his Bankai twice. So we have 7 brand new Bankai reveals in the Soul Society arc, and 3 of them are half reveals. And now we move on to the, in my opinion, slightly disappointing Arrancar arc. Now, when I say slightly disappointing, that is entirely within the context of the fact that you have to remember this story arc is the longest in the series by a considerable margin. And in terms of Bankai reveals, I think it kind of falls short overall. But let's take a look. And actually things start off very well. The first Bankai we see in this arc is during the initial Arrancar invasion of Grimmjow's Fraction. Chapter 204, Ikkaku activates his Bankai Ryumon Hozakimaru, which is, in my opinion, the model standard for a Bankai reveal. I still absolutely love it, and to this day, many of the tropes in this reveal I associate with Bankai reveals. Ikkaku being highly reluctant to using it, actually getting to the point of near death before pulling it out as a last resort, and also wanting no one else to be around when he activates it. These are all cute things that I really have forever associated with people using Bankai. It's a shame that this is the only time Ikkaku uses his Bankai in the series, but because of that, and because it gets a good showing against Edorad, I think it's fair to say this is a full reveal. And then from chapter 206 onwards, Toshiro Hitsugaya makes his return, once again using Daiguren Hyorin Maru, this time against the Fraction Xiaolong Kufong. And this time I think we can consider this a full reveal. He actually fights using his Bankai right at the end of the fight. We even get to see one of its abilities in Ryu Senka. And Hitsugaya would use his Bankai periodically now throughout the Arrancar arc, and I think this fight is really the full reveal of what he can actually do with it in a battle. Admittedly, he is using Gentei Kaijo for the majority of the fight, but I think at this point you can say he is actually revealing his Bankai properly. Now, like I said, the Arrancar arc is a really long one, and we don't get another quote-unquote new Bankai reveal for over 100 chapters. And up next is the return of Seijin Komamura using his Bankai Kokujo Tengen Mio in chapter 327. And like I said, we didn't know at the time in the Soul Society arc that this Bankai wouldn't really have any other abilities, but him actually going through the process of summoning it, taking out Cho Neng Po in a single hit, you get to see that they share the same movements, and then he puts the Bankai away, it disappears. This, in my opinion, is finally the full reveal of Komamura's Bankai, even though we didn't find out its critical weakness until the Tosen fight much later on. Next up, as the Fate Karakura Town battle is really getting underway and the fights with the top 3 Espada are taking place, we finally get another new Bankai reveal as Soifon activates Jakuho Raikoben in chapter 359. There's no getting around it, Jakuho Raikoben is a pretty simplistic Bankai, but that means this gets to be a full reveal right off the bat. She summons her enormous rocket launcher and fires the missile straight at Baragon. There's an incredible explosion, and that's effectively all her Bankai can do, but it did look awesome. Next up, as the Espada fights are winding down, Kensei Mugaruma saves Mashiro from Wonder Weiss, and being the no-nonsense guy that he is, he activates his Bankai for the first time as soon as the battle begins, and it's Teken Tachikaze in chapter 377. Unfortunately for Kensei, this is the only new Bankai reveal of the Arrancar arc to fall into the half-reveal status, as the moment he activates his Bankai and sort of lunges at Wonder Weiss, Kubo elects to cut away, and we don't see Kensei again until I think the Lost Agent arc, so we don't get to find out anything this Bankai does. And then, right towards the end of this mammoth story arc, we get one of the most, I would say, anticipated Bankai of all time, as the villainous Gin Ichimaru activates his Bankai Kamishini no Yari against Ichigo in chapter 398. This is a bit of a weird one. I'm very content, though, to put it in a full reveal. It just takes a bit of time to get going, but I actually quite like how Kubo chooses to do that. Essentially, Gin reveals his Bankai's abilities quite slowly over a period of time, showing Ichigo the incredible speed, the lethality of the weapon, different abilities like Buto and Buto Renjin, and it finally culminates in the ultimate ability of kill Kamishini no Yari against Aizen himself. Gin's Bankai is an awesome spectacle, and I'm happy to give it a full reveal. And so that's the end of the Arrancar arc, and considering it runs from volume 21 all the way to 48, it is a little disappointing in my opinion that we only get 4 brand new Bankai reveals, one of which is a half reveal. And then we also get 2 full reveals for already revealed Bankai in the Soul Society arc belonging to Hitsugaya and Komamura. It's nice to get those 2 characters fleshed out and rounded out in this arc because we'll be seeing a lot more of them to come. But it is a shame that with such high stakes in the Arrancar arc and the final battle in the Fate Karakura town, that there weren't more Bankai on display. I know hindsight is amazing, it's the best thing in the world, it's not exactly fair to retroactively write the story, but if I could, I think the Fate Karakura town battle, specifically the fight against Stark, would have been an excellent place to insert the Bankais of both Love and Ukitake. However, it was not meant to be. And so, up next is, of course, the Lost Agent arc, and this is not exactly going to take very long. There aren't many Bankai revealed in this arc, though admittedly the 2 we do get I think are both pretty cool. So in chapter 474, we get the brand new second version of Ichigo's Tensa Zangetsu. After he gets his powers back, there's an amazing scene where he blows out of Yukio's contained reality, essentially, to face Ginjo in an image and stance reflecting the reveal of his Bankai in the Soul Society arc. The new one, however, in my opinion, just looks so cool. And this is, of course, a full reveal. You get to see everything it can do. It's Tensa Zangetsu at the end of the day. It hasn't got exactly a litany of abilities, but it does get a nice, if short, fight against Ginjo. And speaking of Ginjo, a chapter later, 475, he would activate his unnamed Bankai, and in my opinion, again, this is a full reveal, because I think Ginjo's Bankai is, because Ginjo in many ways is supposed to be a dark mirror of Ichigo, his Bankai probably doesn't have a plethora of abilities. It's just like Ichigo's, he's quite fast. At one point he fires a Sero. You get to see enough of it, and of course you never see it again, where I'm happy to consider this one a full reveal. And that's it for the Lost Agent arc. Anyone who's saying this is the best arc for Bankai reveals probably is kidding themselves, but it's not bad. For such a short arc, we get 2 brand new Bankais, no half reveals here either, so I'm pretty happy with it. And finally, the Piece de Resistance, we get the 1,000-year Blood War arc, and even from looking at the title of this arc, it felt to me and many others that Kubo was just going to go all out with this war against the Quincy's, and when you look at this Bankai list, that's kind of exactly what he does. And yet we start this list off kind of weirdly. The first Bankai to be revealed in this arc is in chapter 504, and that's Chojiro Sasakibe's Koko Gonryu Rikyu, being used from beyond the grave, because Chojiro is already dead at this point, but it's kind of neat that we actually get to see his Bankai being used by Driscoll Bursey, and in my opinion this is another full Bankai reveal. Now Yamamoto mentions, of course, that the Bankai is weaker than when Chojiro was using it, but I don't think that necessarily means there are less abilities on show, or this isn't exactly what it can do. I think it's just Driscoll's attacks lack the punch that Chojiro was able to give. So I think what we see here is what we would get with Chojiro's Bankai, and I'm very happy with that. And then, speaking of Yamamoto, of course, chapter 506, barely a few chapters after Sasakibe's Bankai, we get the highly anticipated Bankai of the Captain Commander himself. And it is incredible. Of course, this is a full Bankai reveal. Kubo takes his time eking out the different abilities of Yamamoto's impossibly powerful Zanka no Tachi. We really get to see how this Bankai lives up to the abilities of the Captain Commander, and in my opinion, Kubo did both Yamamoto and Ryujin Jaka true justice with this power. It just looks so cool. Everything it can do is great, it's symbolic, it's powerful, it feels overbearing. My biggest disappointment is that we never got to see it again, even though it was stolen by Yhwach. And coming in at chapter 526, during the kind of downtime between invasions, Kenpachi Zaraki and Yachiru Unohana have a pretty amazing battle where she is essentially trying to train him to unlock his power and help him learn Shikai. And during this fight, as she's kind of pushed towards the edge, when it gets closer and closer to the end, she activates her Bankai, Minazuki. And unfortunately, in my opinion, I've got to give this one a half reveal. We just have no idea what this thing can do, and the only answers you're ever going to get, at least until Kubo himself comes out with one, is our conjecture, because we have no idea. It does appear that she transforms her blade into a whip of blood or something, a dripping blood sword, and maybe it is actually acidic. Maybe she is actually melting them both into skeletons. Or it's just a figurative representation of the two fighters being stripped to their most base instincts. Either way, we just don't know. Now, this next one is a bit of a weird one, and actually this arc is kind of filled with these moments, and I've elected to include this one as I think it is a brand new version of this Bankai, much in the same way as Ichigo's Tensa Zangetsu. And of course, that is Seijin Komamura's Kokujo Tengen Myo Dangai Joy, where essentially his massive soldier sheds his armor and reveals his true form beneath, the immortal Bankai of the now humanized Seijin in chapter 556. I was a little reticent to include this one in here and a few in the future as well, but I do feel that this is a brand new version of a Bankai, like I said, an iteration on, much like Ichigo's two Tensa Zangetsus before. And as we've said in the past, Kokujo Tengen Myo is not exactly the deepest Bankai ever, so this is another full reveal for Komamura. Moving swiftly onto chapter 560, we have our first old Bankai being brought back into the limelight to be actually explained properly, and that's Kensei's Tekken Tachikase, now being used against the Sternritter Masked Masculine. And finally, we can say this is a full reveal of his Bankai's abilities. We actually get to see him use it in a big, full-on fist fight with the Quincy himself, and actually Kensei explains to us exactly what his Bankai can do before he's swiftly defeated. And then, not a chapter later, but one of my favourite captains, Rojuro Rose Otoribashi, would use his Bankai, Kinshara Butodan, in chapter 561, and again, much like Kensei's before it, this is a full reveal of what this Bankai can do. Rose, for better or worse, actively explains everything his Bankai can do from Act 1 to Act 2 to Act 3, and is ruthlessly nearly killed because of it. However, this fight with Masked Masculine is not done yet. There's another Bankai yet to be shown off here, and luckily for Rose and Kensei, Renji arrives from the Royal Palace to save them, and in chapter 564 he gives us a look at his brand new Bankai, Sowo Zabimaru, the true version of his Bankai all along. And this is again a full reveal. He uses it actively against Master Masculine. We get to see him use both the gigantic ape arm and also his serrated blade, including abilities as well like Zaga Teppo, which he uses to finish off the Quincy once and for all. Up next, the 1000-Year Blood War arc just keeps on delivering, as we have, in my opinion, one of the most anticipated Bankai in the series, and probably one of the most well-deserved, and that is Rukia Kuchiki using Hakano Togame against Asnot in chapter 569. Now, you don't get to see the true beauty of this Bankai until chapter 570, but it is kind of split into two halves. She activates her Bankai, she says the name, does the stance, begins the transformation, and then sends out a massive icy shockwave in 569, and then the damage is shown in the next chapter. Now, I was a little kind of hesitant about whether or not this is a full or half reveal, but in my opinion, looking at it contextually within the story, this is probably, again, a full reveal. I imagine this is all she can actually do with this Bankai, because that's the kind of Bankai it is at this point in time. It's a one-shot area of effect kill. She swings her sword once and it just absolutely freezes the opponent to their core and they are killed. And so I'm happy with saying this is a full reveal, but I would expect more if we get more down the line. So that's a pretty crazy slate of Bankai reveals within the space of about 10 chapters or something like that. But now we have to wait a little bit longer. Our next Bankai reveal doesn't happen until chapter 609, and this is a pretty strange one. This Bankai belongs to the leader of the Zero Division, Ichibe Hyosabe, as he activates his Bankai Shirafude Ichimonji. It's a weird one because it's very understated, and I think that's done to kind of show you Ichibe's power, his eminence, the fact that this is all very beneath him. You know, even having a Bankai is just not a big deal to him. He even mentions that, you know, back in my day, these weren't Bankai wasn't even a thing. I was the one who gave it the name Bankai. This just used to be called Shinuchi, you know, evolved Zanpakuto. But regardless, it is cool to see him use this against the Quincy King Yhwach, and you get a real taste of his just incredible power. Now, despite Ichibe's Bankai being a slightly weird, a slightly understated one, again, I think this is another full reveal. Kubo's doing a great job with most of these Bankai. It's a very simple one, and I think honestly, the most effective Bankai generally are. It essentially just allows him to rewrite the name of anything that he has robbed a name from, and I think the implications there are astronomical. And next up, as we begin the final section of this arc, the Varvelt invasion, we have another character who, much like Komamura, I wasn't sure about including on this list, but again, I think it's fair. And that's Mayuri Kurotsuchi with his new Bankai, or at least a new version of his Bankai, Konjiki Ashisogi Jizo Matai Fukuin Shodai, which is basically a gigantic, grotesque purple baby. It's sort of actually just, you know, his Bankai always kind of was a big baby thing, and now it's just a massive baby that sits there with like lanterns coming off its head. The symbolism here is cool, but the Bankai is grotesque, as this massive monstrosity births essentially versions of Mayuri's old Bankai, which can be adapted to the fight he's currently in. I think this feels like a genuine evolution to me. He's not likely to ever go back to his old version of his Bankai. So for me, I'm happy to put this on the list. And again, I think this is a full reveal. We get to see the primary ability of this Bankai, which is just to create versions of Mayuri's old Bankai that can counter anything. Closing in on the end of the series itself now, and we have some of the absolute most anticipated Bankai of the entire fanbase. And clearly I think that was done on purpose. But chapter 647 brings us Shunsui Kyoraku's Katen Kyokotsu Karamatsu Shinju in a glorious full reveal. And Kubo's done this on purpose. He knew for a while that Kyoraku's was one of the Bankai people wanted to see the absolute most, myself included, Kyoraku being my favourite captain. And you get to see it in all of its glory against the Sturmritter Lille Barrow. You get to see him going through Acts 1, 2, 3 and 4 of his suicidal play. It's just a shame that it didn't work out for him in the end. And then up next, chapter 664, the Varvel arc really just was a kind of slew of highly anticipated Bankai reveals. We have Kisuke Urahara revealing his Bankai Kanon Biraki Benehime Aratame. And again, this was a Bankai that I think many of us were obviously incredibly excited to see, but really weren't sure how Kubo would actually pull it off, because Benehime is quite a nebulous Zanpakuto, much in the same way as Katen Kyokotsu. And while I like Shunsui's Bankai, I do think Urahara's is more successful. It goes back to that idea of being very simplistic with a single ability that has just numerous applications, and because of that, this is obviously, again, a full reveal. You get to see everything this Bankai can do, because on the one hand, it can't do that much, but with that single ability, it can do everything. Kisuke can reconstruct anything he touches, and that is just a really perfect ability for this character. And the penultimate new Bankai we get in Bleach, chapter 668, gives us Kenpachi Zoraki's unnamed Bankai, turning him into a brutish monster, an Oni demon with blood-red skin, horns. His Shikai is now smashed in half as if to kind of show you his overwhelming power, but also his feral and rough nature. And this again is just a really, really cool Bankai, and it's difficult to say if this is a full reveal or not. Kenpachi obviously isn't really a character for special abilities. He's a berserker through and through. And so I think that's essentially what we get here. What you get is what you kind of expect with Kenpachi. He just leaps around. He's now incredibly fast, incredibly powerful. So powerful he can cut through Gerard Valkyrie's supposedly unbreakable shield. It's just this Bankai is really not around for very long, and it kind of feels like a bit of a tease because Kenpachi's arm snaps and Yachiru's like, I tried to release too much of your power, but your body's not ready for that. And so it kind of feels like, is there more? Is there more to this Bankai, Kubo, or is Kenpachi just a crazed berserker? I think I'm going to have to say, much like Rukia's Bankai, that in the context of the story, this is a full reveal. But again, with the possibility that there is more to come in the future. Now, I just want to address this before we reach the final Bankai in the series. You might be wondering where adult Hitsugaya is on this list, but in my opinion, that's not a new Bankai, that's just Hitsugaya revealing a new ability of his old Bankai, because he's quite literally using his old Bankai when he transforms into his adult self. There is possibly an argument to be made there, but the way I look at it is he is still using the same Bankai in the Thousand Year Blood War that he was using in the Arrancar Arc, only he has trained with it and worked with it and matured it to the point where he can access its final ability. In my opinion, it feels a little bit like Shukei Haku Tekken for Byakuya, the absolute pinnacle of what Hitsugaya can achieve. But finally, the last Bankai to be revealed in the series on chapter 677 is Ichigo's third and maybe final Tensa Zangetsu, although considering we now have another chapter after 686, who knows where Kubo will take this, if he even does in the future. And Ichigo's third and final version of Tensa Zangetsu might be the most frustrating of all, as the moment he activates it, the blade is snapped in half by Yhwach. The blade is repaired, however, and he does return to battle against Yhwach and use an incredibly powerful Getsuga Tensho that cuts the Quincy King in two. And it's difficult to say then if this is a full reveal or not. The general rule around Tensa Zangetsu has been that it doesn't have a crazy number of abilities, and I don't necessarily know why that would change here. I think it just feels like we were really robbed of a true showcase of this power. After Ichigo gets his Bankai, he has an incredible fight with Byakuya. After he gets his second version, he has a great fight with Ginjo. But here, it felt like there was a real build-up to this new Bankai, because he doesn't use it after getting his new Shikai until this very moment, and it does kind of feel like it was whisked away. But in my heart, I do think this is a full reveal. I don't think that this Bankai can do crazy, crazy stuff. I think you kind of see it all here anyway. It just feels very fractured. There is talk about the Bankai being able to, deceive fate and cut fate and all that sort of thing, but that feels very kind of high concept to me, very sort of conceptual, not necessarily an ability of his Bankai, but more Ichigo himself as the kind of being that so much of what is going on in the world of Bleach revolves around. So I'm going to give it a full reveal, but I don't necessarily feel great about it. But that's it for the 1,000 Year Blood War arc. That was a seriously long one. And in fact, the final arc of Bleach gave us 12 brand new Bankai, and in my opinion at least, only one half reveal in Unohana, although honestly I could see arguments being made for the likes of Rukia, Kenpachi, and even Ichigo. Now, of course, this was just the canon manga, but in Can't Fear Your Own World light novels, we do get the Bankais for a number of people, including major characters like Shuhei Hisagi and Shinji Hirake. But this particular video was just looking at the manga story arcs. And so, kind of seeing it all in front of you like that, which arc do you think did it the best? I feel like the obvious answer is the 1,000-Year Blood War, but also the Soul Society arc is home to so many truly iconic Bankai moments. The Lost Agent arc, it's a little bit unfair, but certainly the Arrancar arc I personally find to be a little disappointing. But do let me know in the comments below, A, what is your favourite Bankai reveal of all time, and B, which of the story arcs do you think had the best representation for Bankai in the series. Alright guys, but I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments below, like I said, which Bankai is your favourite, which arc do you think does it best. Don't forget to hit subscribe if you haven't done already. And until next time, I'll catch you later. I'll see you then.